Thank you all and welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Thanks, Kimberly. I'm Maria Riegger, and I'm from the Washington, D.C. area.
Great. And we talked before the show, but I need to know everything you're willing to share about your past and leading up to you being a lawyer.
Sure, thank you. So I'm a corporate attorney, like you mentioned, and an author and a parenting expert. And one of the reasons I chose to become a parenting expert and focus on that is because I had a lot of challenges learning how to be a good parent that were rooted in childhood abuse, unfortunately. My father passed away in an accident when I was 11 years old, and that effectively ended my childhood. I'm the oldest of three. I was responsible for my siblings after that. And unfortunately, the single mother who raised me was a covert narcissistic abuser. And as a kid, I knew something was off with my relationship with my mother. And if people have suffered from abuse from a covert narcissist, they know what I'm talking about. You sense that something is off, but you can't really identify what it is. As a kid, you just don't have the sophistication to identify it. And at the time, in the 80s and 90s, I did not have access to all the resources, right, via the internet and other things that people have access to now. So it wasn't until my 30s when my therapist put narcissism on my radar and said, hey, how your mother interacts with you is not normal and it's not healthy. And
Tell me a question. I have a question.
Sure.
What is, for those who don't know, narcissistic mean?
So it's a term that's used a lot. So when I use it, I'm talking about somebody who qualifies for a cluster B personality disorder called narcissistic personality disorder. Now, people who meet those criteria usually do not seek treatment. So it's hard to get formally diagnosed. But that's what I'm talking about. Somebody who would qualify under mental health standards, the diagnostic manual for NPD.
Give me an example of being narcissistic.
Sure. So somebody who is extremely insecure, who cannot be alone with their own thoughts because they start to decompensate, who needs attention, constant attention from others, who cannot stand to see others surpass them in success, however they define success. Somebody who's very grandiose, who thinks very highly of themselves. So and narcissists or people that have NPD, a lot of the times kind of live vicariously through the kids. They want the kids to achieve, to make them look good, but they don't want the kids to eclipse the narcissist. So that's I'm not a mental health professional, so I'm not qualified to diagnose it, but those are some of the criteria, right?
Great. Okay, you can continue. I'm listening.
Sure, no problem. So a lot of people deal with that kind of abuse and constant gaslighting when you're made to question your own reality, your own intuition. A lot of people deal with that as adults through addiction to substances, but I wasn't addicted to substances, but I was addicted to overachieving, to work, to being productive, to giving reasons for, to try to show people that I was worthy of love. And I became a codependent. And my therapist talks about codependency in terms of addiction to relationships. So just because somebody is not addicted to substances doesn't mean they don't have other addictions, right? So all those things I had to work on.
I don't mean to cut you off, but
Sure.
Do you think that your status being a high-end corporate attorney, do you think that is therapeutic for other doctors to see therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists? How do you feel about that?
About being an attorney?
Well, being an attorney, for one, a corporate attorney,
Right.
but you go to see a therapist and a doctor, which some people are trying to label as, not good, like you're off or something, which I don't believe. You're
Sure.
a corporate attorney. So what's your view on high-end people like lawyers and doctors going to see other psychiatrists?
I got you. So, I think there's a lot less of a stigma about seeking mental health services when you're in that kind of position. So I don't see it as something negative, but it's personal, so I wouldn't necessarily disclose it. depending on what kind of law you do, like if you're, I do not litigate, but if you're litigating and you're representing clients in court, you're representing families, and you have things you have to seek mental health treatment for, you may or may not have to disclose that. But in my case, right, I don't feel the need to disclose it, and I don't think of it negatively. I think of it as kind of just maintenance. Like you go to get your physical checkups every year. I go to check in with my therapist. And I did not have good relationship models. I had to learn to be a good parent. And I remember when my son was like 5, I remember thinking, because I was completely emotionally dysregulated as a parent. And as Bessel van der Kolk said, that's the hallmark of the abused child, is the child grows into an adult who cannot regulate emotionally, who has a hair trigger reaction. And I remember when my son was about 5 thinking, I need to work on this. I need to work on this. Not changing my kid. I have to change how I parent, because I'm upset, I'm yelling, he's upset, he's yelling. And if I want to continue to have a relationship with him where he feels comfortable talking to me through his adolescence and teens, I have to change what I'm doing. And it was a willingness to consider that I was not parenting effectively, but I would get the tools to do so. So when I work with parents, that's the first thing I look for, is do they have a willingness to admit they may be wrong about some things, or that they could learn some things, or that they could improve. We could all improve.
Yes.
Right. Always. But if I meet somebody who they know all there is to know about parenting, their ideas are fixed, they cannot be convinced that there's a better way, that's really tough to work with. Right. Because I'm always learning about stuff, and I'm always thinking about my parenting. Did I handle this correctly? Could I have done this better? Could I have worded this better? Did my annoyance come through too much? Did that inhibit my kid from sharing things with me? So I'm constantly thinking about how I can improve. So
they said, Albert Einstein said, this is how you can tell if you're smart. You ask questions. You wonder why. What is wrong? What's going on with this? What's going on? You're very smart.
Thank you. I hope so. I'm trying. But it's just this idea that you could improve, that there may be a better way, right? And no parent is perfect. You're gonna mess up. And when you mess up, apologize. Kids, a parent apologizing to a kid is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that, like you said, that they're open-minded, and that they are willing to admit they're wrong, that they're humble, vulnerable, but also secure enough to admit, hey, I didn't handle that correctly. I'm sorry. Right. So an authentic apology to a child is very meaningful. Right. As long as, if you're apologizing all the time and not changing behavior, that's more toxic. But we all have to apologize once in a while. Right. So that's very powerful for a child to get an authentic apology from a parent. And it makes the child more comfortable messing up too. Right.
Another thing, if you keep apologizing to the child, what's going to happen is the child is going to develop that type of personality when they get older, and it's going to complete the cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If my son apologizes for something he has no reason to apologize for, I'll tell him, you don't need to apologize for that. Like, you didn't do anything to apologize for. So yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. Yep.
Tell me about you being in corporate. Let's rewind. How was the logic test? The test to get in?
Oh yeah. The LSAT, there is a logic part. So I excelled in that because I'm an analytical person. So the type of law I practice is very suited to my abilities, right? I don't litigate. I'm a high anxiety person. I could not work in an industry like family law. It would be too much for me because I'd have too much empathy. I'd have too much anxiety to work in that field. But transactional work, contracts, banking, things like that. That's an area it's well suited to my skill set. So I like practicing law. It doesn't always give me that creative outlet that's what my writing is for. But yeah, it's well suited. It's one of the reasons I chose that profession. It's just well suited to my skills. Yeah.
This is a dumb question. Well, it's no dumb question. It's just a question. But the question goes like this: do you work for the state or do you work for people? You see what I'm saying? Or
I
is that
do.
how it is? Okay, how is it?
Yeah, I work for a federal agency, so I work for the federal regulator, right?
How long you been doing it?
Oh my gosh, since 2012. So 12 years. Yep. Yep.
And you got a book, right?
Yes. So I'm an author, fiction and nonfiction. So my nonfiction books, I have a couple parenting books, and I've written a book on legal help for self-published authors because there are so many questions that self-published authors have about protecting themselves legally, protecting their copyrights, defamation, and what they can put in their nonfiction books and things like that. So that's a lot. That's an area that I can be of, of help to them.
Tell me an excerpt from your fiction and then tell me an excerpt from your nonfiction.
Oh my
Go a
gosh.
little more in depth too.
Sorry.
I want to know what the two books are called and go a little in depth after
Sure.
after you talk about the excerpts.
Sure. So on my the nonfiction side, I write parenting and spirituality books. So I have two books. One is your Gemini child, and one is your Scorpio child. Those are probably the energies I know the most about. I'm a Gemini sun. My son is a Scorpio sun. My father was a Scorpio sun. My mother has a Scorpio Mars. My second husband has a Scorpio moon. I cannot get away from those people. So it's a very Scorpio is a misunderstood energy. It's probably my favorite energy. It is so interesting, and Scorpio people are so interested in going in depth and really figuring stuff out, not at a superficial level, at really digging deep and getting to the bottom of things. And it's something I love about that energy. It's something I see in my son all the time. They make really good psychoanalysts, really good therapists, things like that, really good detectives. But yeah, it's an energy that is always searching for soul fulfillment. You can't get that from just the physical things on the earth, the material things, right? So it's an energy that does not always feel comfortable, just going out and doing the mundane that most people do, because it doesn't feed them on a soul level. So, right. So that's probably my best-selling book is the one, Your Scorpio Child. Yeah. And I get a lot of questions from parents about Scorpio kids because they tend to
What
be
month is
very hard.
Scorpio?
Sorry?
What month is
So
Scorpio?
October 21st through November 20th.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You can continue though. I'm sorry.
No problem. So yeah, that's a book I really enjoyed writing. And that's yeah, I talk a lot about that need for soul fulfillment. So parents can introduce and guide their children into, figuring out what they need to feel fulfilled, right? Not just the material stuff, but also on a soul level, like what they need to feel content. So yeah. And then
what do you see before you talk about the other books? What do you see about soul? What is your interpretation of the soul? Because obviously you've done your research.
That's a great question. So the soul to me is somebody's energy, right? And I'm coming from the place of we're all connected, our energy's all connected. It's one kind of universal consciousness. So my personal belief is that, your soul is here in this human form for a limited amount of time, and then it maybe has multiple iterations and multiple experiences on Earth, right? Now, some people call that reincarnation or things like that. You can think of it like that. So I think, me personally, I think when the body is tired and somebody passes away, the soul's energy is like kind of subsumed back into however you want to think of it, heaven, universal consciousness, and then possibly they're sent back to have more experiences on Earth. But it's somebody's like the essence of their energy. And people who come to me who may be skeptical of astrology, I'll say, look, leave astrology out of it for a minute. You would agree that people have an energy about them. You can call that aura or whatever. We say this all the time. We experience this all the time. My energy does not vibe well with this person's energy. Their energy is too frenetic. Their energy is too slow. Their energy is too dark. It's too whatever. And that's a fact. We're made up of energy. So in my mind, the birth chart, which is the snapshot of the position of the planets at the moment of an individual's birth, that is the kind of the blueprint for that individual's energy. And when I do coaching sessions or consults with parents on their birth chart or the children's birth chart, that's what we talk about the expression of that person's energy. And I like using astrology in parenting because it emphasizes this fact that the child is a separate entity from the parent with different energy, with different wants, needs, ways of approaching communication, ways of approaching relationships. And that kind of emphasizes that point. So that's why, it's one of the reasons I like to use it if the parents are open to it, because you could really get a good handle understanding somebody's energy that way.
Well said, Miss Riegger. Oh my God. It's funny, how the Big Bang happened. My interpretation kind of does align with yours. I believe when the Big Bang happened, energy was dispersed upon planets, and we're just in one big womb of the universe that's just building different planets with energy, different types of relationships. One last question. What is your interpretation on that before we move on?
I think that's likely. Yeah, that could be a definite possibility. I mean, it's a question I ask myself a lot, like, why would the position of the planets have an effect on someone's personality? And it's because of that energy pull. So it's quite plausible that that's what happened. We don't know, right? But absolutely, it's definitely possible. Yeah.
What's the other excerpt from your other book? I would love to know.
Sure, no problem. So the fiction side.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a series, then a couple of standalone books, and another novel I'm working on. I'm also working on my memoir. I'm a typical Gemini. I always have a lot of projects going on. I'm so scattered.
You are so busy.
I'm busy. I'm busy. It helps when I'm an introvert. I like to be busy. I like to go out one-on-one with people, but I don't like to go out in general just to pass the time. Like, this is what I like to do. So that helps. If I were an extrovert, I have a big problem. Yeah. So the first series, the first fiction book I published was the first in I call the Law School Heretic series, Miscalculated Risks. Now I draw on a lot of my personal experiences as a law student in Washington, D.C., right? But it's a young woman who goes to law school and kind of feels like a fish out of water, feels like she doesn't quite belong there. From a multicultural background, doesn't feel like she belongs there. So the genre is contemporary romance, so there is a romance, right? But I also like to write about characters who are flawed. I don't like to write about characters who are, the kind of fluffy and perfect, because that's not real life, right? When I read books too, I like to read about characters who are flawed, but who are trying to redeem themselves. So that's kind of it's kind of an urban contemporary romance, but it's a fun series to write. And then one of my standalone novels actually was given a 5-star review by the Kindle Book Review. Very excited about that, called Thunderstruck, which is a second chance romance set during a political campaign. And I used to do a lot of political volunteering for friends and things. So I've drawn some of my own experiences for that, but it was also a fun book to write. Yeah.
Do you think any of these books would reach Hollywood for a movie or anything?
Oh, man, that would be wonderful. I'd like to think so. I'd like to have, a good mindset about that. So I think if you keep writing and working and marketing yourself, that is a possibility. I have talked to people who work in that area, who work in Hollywood doing scripts, and they have told me we're always looking for new ideas, always. So yeah, I mean, I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that that's not really going to happen for me or that can't happen. No, it is a real possibility as long as you talk to the right people and you put yourself out there and you keep marketing yourselves. It's hard sometimes to put yourself out there, especially because the book is so personal to you, right? It's hard for authors to take criticism about their own books because we spend so much time writing it, perfecting it, editing. We spend so much time with it. It's like our baby, right? But you have to be open to feedback if you're going to if you hoping to get something made into a series or a movie, which would be fantastic. So I'm
Do you?
hopeful.
I'm hopeful for you.
Thank you.
Do you use these type of beads? Because it just, I feel like you may do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I do sometimes. It just, yeah. What do you feel called to do? Sometimes, uh, I'll have rocks or some crystals, something that you feel called to have. I'm always, if I see a shop with that stuff, I always kind of look around and see what they have. It's just fun. And they come from the earth, and that has its own energy. In fact, I have a friend who's a psychic intuitive who reads auras, and she tells me when you pull a leaf from a tree and you put it under magnetic resonance imaging, it has an aura around it.
No way.
It's a living thing. Yeah, that's what she told me, and I looked it up. Of course, this is my research. I have not scientifically verified this, but yeah, if it's a living thing, it has kind of an energy around it. So those crystals and rocks, I mean, come from the earth. So they're going to contain, the idea is that they contain some energy. And that's the energy that resonates with people. Like they go, and maybe you're drawn to a certain type of bead or crystal, and that has to do with your own energy.
I'll say this and then we can move on. Hitler was in, I don't condone, I don't like Hitler, but I read about him in history, and he was looking for powerful light crystals around the world. And I'm wondering why were you looking for these crystals? So I say to myself, there must be crystals around the world that are powerful enough that maybe they do things that people don't understand. So I was wondering, have you read that, or what is your insight? And then we'll move on from crystals.
Sure. I have not read about that with the crystals, although he did use an astrologer. I have read about that. Yeah. And a lot of very wealthy business people nowadays use astrologers. I mean, they don't talk about it openly, but they do. So, and a lot of therapists will use astrology too if the client is open to it. On my YouTube channel, where I talk about parenting content, I interviewed an astrologer who's a psychotherapist and treats children and uses astrology. So a lot of therapists incorporate it too.
What is so powerful about astrology, Maria?
I think because it helps us understand the energy of the individual, and helps us, as in terms of parents and relationships with their kids, it really helps the parent be in a better position to guide the child and to accept the child, right? So, and that we're talking about looking at the birth chart specifically, not predicting future events. I'm talking specifically about reading the birth chart and reading, doing a relationship reading where we're comparing the parent's birth chart to the child's birth chart and seeing where there may be some areas of friction in their relationship that we can address and help them with.
That's pretty deep. I heard you earlier, but I didn't know that you can actually compare the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's amazing. That's very amazing. And tell me, like, if you had to give a piece of advice to an entrepreneur that has been in an abusive situation, right? And they want to become a lawyer like you did, pass the bar with no problem. Tell me, what kind of advice would you give them if they have children too, like you?
Sure. So, right. So first of all, don't let anything about your past hold you back. There's nothing wrong with you because you went through some hardship. I don't think anyone can get to adulthood without suffering some hardship. I don't like to, compare people's hardships, right? It's all traumatic. So that's the question, is how you're going to deal with it. And I'm not saying you have to get over it. That's pretty impossible to do, but you can work on yourself, integrate that into your whole self, and get past that and still have a successful, fulfilling life. My message would be, don't let that hold you back. And also, you are deserving of all the good things, of abundance, of financial abundance, of the career that you want, the family you want. You are deserving of that. So, and if you have a hard time accepting that, then maybe you need to work on yourself with therapy, other modalities, things like that. But yeah, that would be my main message. Don't let anything in your past hold you back. And also, you deserve all that good stuff.
Well said. And how does it feel helping people as a corporate lawyer? You told me you help people.
Sure. So, well, I work for a federal agency. I've done pro bono work in the past
Oh,
for uncontested divorces, wills, things like that. And that's very gratifying, that work, because so many people do not seek those services because they're expensive, right? A lot of people don't have the money to have wills drafted or even get a divorce sometimes or get representation during a divorce because that's a civil matter. You don't, it's not like the criminal courts. You don't get an attorney, a free attorney, pro bono attorney. You have to hire one or find somebody to take a case pro bono if it's a civil action. So, but that feels good because you're helping people get things done and, move on with their lives and, planning for their estates and that they would not be able to do if you didn't help them. So that's very gratifying. Yeah.
thank you. And where do you see everything that you've done? This is the last question going for the future of Ms. Riegger.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate to be working on my speaking business and getting speaking engagements this year to kind of get more exposure and help more people. So yeah, so I'll be doing a speaking engagement at the end of this month, and speaking on parenting, but also on a lot of challenges that I find parents have professionally that stem from the same source of the issues that they have with their parenting, which is poor boundaries, people pleasing, procrastination, things like that. So I speak on all those topics and what parents and professionals can do to get past that, to have stronger boundaries, both personally but also professionally, so they don't burn out. And again, that they could focus on things that are really important and not feel like they're pulled in different directions, not feel like they cannot say no. That's a big one, especially with women. I find we're kind of conditioned to be pleasing, and it's hard for us to say no. So we have to say no sometimes. So
Well said. I went through a situation like that, but how can the people find you?
sure. So my blog and main website is lawschoolheretic.com. And you can email me directly at maria@lawschoolheretic.com. And on that website, you can also book a coaching session directly with me. And I'm also on YouTube. It's called Positive Parenting with Astrology with Maria Riegger. We have a really active viewership on YouTube. And I get comments from parents all the time that they find my content really helpful. And that makes me feel really good that that content is speaking to them and that I could be of some help. But yeah, that's how you can find me.
It's funny because before I say this, are you on Apple Podcast too?
I am not. No, not yet.
Okay, great. It's not great as in a bad thing, but here's the deal. You have a woman, Maria Riegger, that takes her time out to study her kids. She studies her kids through astrology and she puts the information out through YouTube. So the rest of the parents can join in and see this astrology that helps, build children, mother and father relationships. This is amazing. I am so glad I had you on my show today, and it was an honor. Do you have any last words before we end, Maria?
Thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate you having me on today. This is a great conversation. And I can talk at length about this. Yeah, I would say if parents are feeling challenged with the relationship with their children, focus on strengthening the connection rather than getting the kid to do stuff. Like I get the question a lot, how do I get my kid to do this, to focus on grades? First, take a step back and strengthen the relationship. Have more one-on-one time with your kids. Make sure you guys are connected because everything else is easier if you guys are connected.
Thank you. And stay on the line. Thank you guys for watching. You are amazing, you guys. And take care, be safe, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.